Give me a signal. Are we good? We're good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Art Explora Académie des Beaux-Arts panel discussion this afternoon at SITEM. My name's Jemima Montague. I'm the director of Art Explora in the UK. You may not know that Art Explora has an office in London, and I guess we're trying to signal that we are still very much committed to our European friends and partners and working on a European scale, including France, the UK. We already have programs in Spain as well, and of course want to work more widely. The reason we're here today is to celebrate and discuss the winning projects of 3 of the laureats from the 2021 European Award. And in case you don't know, the Art Explora Académie des Beaux-Arts Award was launched in 2020, and it's an award intended to stimulate and encourage greater participation and access to arts and culture. And we're very much looking for projects that demonstrate innovation in the forms and methodologies of engagement. And in the process, we would like to create a network. We would like to gather together examples of projects in the hope that these projects can be replicated, can be scaled, and can build a greater access to arts and culture across Europe by sharing good ideas, essentially, exchange of ideas. You will have seen on the program that, I'm just going to look at my notes here, one of the title of this event is Who Gets to Make the Meaning? And this is a quote from a figurehead in the arts in the UK called Patrick Fox, who runs an agency for collaborative and social art practice in Liverpool. And in a discussion that we had about the democratization of culture, he said that his work is to question who gets to be part of the making of meaning and where do arts and culture belong. And the answer, he said, is that everybody gets to be part of the making of meaning. And I think that's really the topic for our conversation today, and to understand from these 3 different and very interesting projects how participation and engagement with new audiences has been taken in 3 very interesting new directions. We're going to start by having a little introduction on the 3 projects that won the European Award last year. And I'm going to leave each of you to introduce yourselves. Thank you, by the way, for letting me speak in English. I hope you've all got simultaneous translation if you need it. We'll do the questions in any language later, or perhaps not any language, perhaps French or English. I'd like to start by introducing Claire and Stephanie from the XL Museum in Brussels.
Of this one, it's okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claire Leblanc, the director of the Musée d'Ixelles, located in the heart of Brussels. With my colleague Stéphanie, we are going to talk about the project Musée comme chez soi, Museum as Home. Thanks to the invitation of Art Explora and SITEM, thank you. My colleague Stéphanie will tell you more about the project itself. For my part, I'm just going to give you very shortly some contextual elements so that you can understand how the project is born. So the Musée d'Ixelles, you have here 2 slides, one slide about illustrating the Musée d'Ixelles just celebrated is on the 30th anniversary. A few days ago. It was a beautiful party. It is the 2nd art collection in Brussels with nearly 15,000 pieces of work in the collection, mainly offering a large panorama of Belgian art from the 19th century to the present day. We also have some happy accidents, as I like to name, in the collection, Miro, Picasso, Toulouse-Lautrec, and so more. The museum has been now undergoing expansion and renovation for 4 years, and the prospect of reopening by the end of 2024 is now in sight. During his transitional period, we have many projects to redefine the museum, to rethink fully the museum. And one of these is Musée comme chez soi, so museum at home. In fact, our museum has a good balance. Is both international. We have some international exhibition, traveling in Europe, loans everywhere in the world, and also is very local. We have developed a program that is really deliberately geared to the local area, to the local public. It is a public that sees the museum being transformed and that does not know us or not good. So the museum at home is a project born out the context of the closure, this very special period, time, and the desire to work on the link with the public, to share the collection on a different way so that we can build some new relation with the public. So we have a short video where you can see what is the project. If it works. On garde bel et bien les œuvres qui sortent du musée qui vont chez les habitants. Donc là, le partage des collections est maintenu.
So hello everybody, I'm Stephanie from responsible for the education department in our museum. For education department, I'm alone in my department because we are quite a middle-sized museum with 12 people working there. So yeah, what you saw here, that was a special edition during COVID, but actually the idea of Museum at Home is really twice a year to have to invite 10 of our neighbors to host an artwork at home, and also to present the artwork. It's not the idea that we are going there and guiding in their home, but they are really like taking ownership of the artwork there. Like Claire said, there were multiple purposes for this action. The idea was really to connect with the neighborhoods, as when I know there are also a lot of you who don't have really the time to take that time to encounter, to meet the neighborhood. But during the closure, that was the perfect opportunity. And we were also really convinced it could be a good way with our art collection to create new bonds in the neighborhood. So also to use art in a way that people learn to know each other also, and that the museum becomes like an agora, a place where actually people can meet. And so that's really the idea behind this project. It was developed with a very nice partner called Patrimoine à roulettes, so heritage on wheels, I would say. Because as a museum, sometimes you really just want to do something, but you don't have the expertise for that. And also you are in a small team. So then it's just so nice when you can find a partner who knows how it is to engage with the neighborhood, who can help with that. And that's really on that way that we had that great co-creation project. And it's just a fabulous adventure for the museum, and we experienced that last weekend, and I'm still I'm still touched by that because for the neighbors, it's also really like an adventure with the museum, but also with all the local community. So the perspective is really now we have that prize Art Explora to continue till the reopening of the museum. And at the end, we will have about 100 neighbors who have had an artwork of the XL Museum in their own and who have presented it also at home. So maybe just practically, because I know you are from museums, so it's just like, oh, what are they doing with their artworks and conservation, what it is about. So for us, it was really important to have the support of our insurance company, like you can imagine. At the beginning of the project, we were like, oh, it's so crazy, that idea, but actually we want to do that. So we had just a call and they said, oh, but it's just like a loan when you are working with another museum. Just give us the address of your neighbors and just be careful that the artwork don't stay during the night because they don't have all alarm system. Then it was actually so simple as that. So maybe the the frontiers or the obstacle were more like, you know, museum minds, yeah. So, and then the idea is just, okay, very important in this project is the prospection in the neighborhoods. We want to involve the most widest audience. It's sometimes a little bit utopic, but actually to do that, you first have to meet your neighbors and just ring the doorbells and go from home to home. We take really that time to do that and just to explain what it is, the project. We have a special trench coat with reproduction of our artworks, and we are like exhibitionists of art, saying, do you want our artworks? We are quite desperate. Our museum is closed at the moment, and we need you to show the artworks to the public, and actually it's a perfect icebreaker. I wouldn't say everybody would accept to have an artwork during a whole weekend. It's quite a responsibility. So we have to be modest and just say that's quite for the diversity of the public, it's not that evident within the host, like the profile of the host, but hosts are really good ambassadors and they can bring also inside their home people we wouldn't have in the museum. So that's so nice. And also the prospection actions, it's also a good way to say to people who feels, okay, I don't want that artwork at home, but actually we have a nice museum just next door, who would have that. So maybe it's just, okay, the invitation is just launched, and maybe we hope in the future it will also help to penetrate a little bit more the neighborhood. So yeah, just maybe also on Saturday, it's a quite, the neighbors, they have, we made a selection of 40 artworks each time, representative of our collection. We don't choose fragile artworks. We have a maximum value of insurance too, but we don't give old stuff. We had like Rodin, Félicien Robe, so quite names also. It's not the idea. So yeah, it's possible actually. And just on Saturday, the people are visiting each other, because it's also really the idea of the project to enrich the neighborhoods. Yeah. The neighborhood's relations, and on Sunday then they have their home open to the public, and then they present really the artwork on a very, very personal way. They imagine that with the help of somebody of the Museum of Patrimoine à Roulettes, and also for the safety of the artwork, we stay at home. Each host has his mediator, but the mediator become a facilitator and not a guide anymore. So it is a little bit the story. I don't know if you want to add something, Claire.
Just it's okay. Yeah, just a final word. It's a very rich experience, more than we expected. In fact, at the beginning we had some purposes, and it goes so far that it changed completely our way of thinking the new museum for the reopening. It's such humility lesson for our team, because we have our academic way of thinking, our collection, and the people of the neighborhood give us so much about our collection, it becomes their collection, that we will always give the message as an art historian, as museum professional, but we want to give a mediation built with the eyes of the public. And so this project is quite, we have many projects for the closure during this time, but this project is really a starting point for the new museum that we are building, in fact.
And maybe just the last word, if you really want to engage with your neighborhood and your public, if your director is always there when you are just doing the dinner with the neighbors, if she's really on the field when we are doing our actions, it makes a very big difference to have that contact with the team. So that was the story.
Thank you both very much. And now I'm going to hand over to Lorraine, who's from the from Louvre-Lens, the Musée Louvre-Lens.
Hello, my name is Lorraine Villain. I am a mediation project manager, and I've been working in the Louvre-Lens since its opening in 2012. And so I am here to speak about a project we are working on, actually. So it is a collaborative, this project is a collaborative exhibition. Its title is Intime et moi. And this project has a background, and we, in our, like every museum, we have a curatorial and cultural project, and we defined several commitments, and we have, especially we have a commitment in favor of youth, and especially the use of the territory, unskilled or unqualified. So this for the background. This exhibition will take place in the 10th anniversary of the museum, exactly 10 years after its opening in 2012. And let me give you a small overview of this project in 6 points. An exhibition is a curatorship, so the curatorship is composed of a group of 10 young people aged from 18 to 23, without any academic background, without any artistic background. We wanted to work with this kind of public because it's the public from the territory. And me and one of my colleagues are also curators, so it's a big curatorship. So these young people, this small group, are most of them are school dropouts. An exhibition like this, it's also a theme. So you have the title Intime et moi. So the theme is intimacy. We thought it was really important for this target population. This word of intimacy means maybe for them the first time they have new habits, the first relationships, maybe their first own place for the first time. And I think for everybody, it's also a word with a meaning. Maybe during the outbreak of COVID, we all experience our private space maybe more acutely. So it was a theme we thought important, and it was chosen by our director, Marie Lavandier. We didn't want to start from scratch without anything. So it would have been too difficult for these young people. An exhibition, it's also art pieces, and we will exhibit around 30 works of art lent by the Louvre collection and 5 local museums collection. And then this exhibition has its own approach that we developed. It was completely new. It was a completely new experience. So we try to to make them concerned by this exhibition, by this project. So we started with brainstorming session, and the purpose was to make a lot of lists, a lot of keywords for everything they have in mind when we pronounce the word intimacy. And from this list of words, which shows a lot of art pieces from the different collection, and then we visited also museum to complete this list. And then we let these young people discover how a museum is run, and make them discover all the job needed to run an exhibition. And then in this project, we worked with living artists, writers, photographers, painters, and drawers. Finally, this exhibition has, we planned a lot of objectives for these young people, for these small groups. The objectives was to explain them, to show what is going on behind the scene in a museum, the different job needed to run an exhibition, to make them discover how a museum is run, and the different, we are a big team, so it was important to make them discover it. And this project maybe developed for them the different job-related skills and self-confidence, and also creativity. For all visitors, we hope that they will be touched by this, maybe moved by this, the subject of this exhibition. And for the Louvre-Lens, maybe to reach one of our commitments in favor of youth. So be committed for the territories, for its inhabitants, and be the Louvre with a difference, which is part of our curatorial and cultural project. So as a conclusion, this exhibition is completely new, as related to the other exhibition we do currently. Because of this curatorship, completely without any artistic background. Also, this will to make them discover things, discover the museum background and the jobs needed in a museum, and the work with artists.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. And now we're moving over to Helen Charman, who's from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. She's telling us about a project called V&A Innovate.
Yes, actually I'm going to showcase a couple of projects, but none of them in too much depth. And again, thank you, wonderful opportunity to be here today. So the Victoria and Albert Museum, if you haven't heard of us, we're a national museum in the UK, and we have a collection of art, design and performance, and we're the main kind of national museum of applied creativity, and I'm director of the learning programmes, and that spans 5 teams, and today I'm going to talk about some of the projects in the core learning team, working with young people and schools, and then also one of our projects, which is a new museum that we're creating in East London called Young V&A. So we were absolutely delighted and a bit overwhelmed to win the Art Explora Award for V&A Innovate. This is a digital-first programme, and it existed before the pandemic, when so many of us pivoted our programmes online and suddenly found that we had audiences from all around the world. So that was an unexpected creative opportunity. But actually, we established V&A Innovate in order to reach, in theory, every single young person age 11 to 14 nationally through their design education curriculum. And in the UK, we had a new design curriculum put in place in 2015, which was absolutely, it was a fantastic programme, very much about creative citizenship and the agency of design to affect lives and change for the better. But teachers were really struggling with how to engage young people in this new curriculum because it was so different from the old curriculum, which was very much around, woodwork and metalwork. This was about human-centered design, about design as an agent of social change. So through this program, the young people, we set them challenges that are around different themes, and these themes are all very socially engaged. So the coming year, the themes are around care and adaptation and disruption. And the young people work in teams, because obviously in the real world, when we go into the world of work, in the creative industries, we work in teams, we collaborate. We need those skills of critical thinking, communication, collaboration, content knowledge. So we are introducing young people to the professional world of design practice and applied creativity. And we set them the challenges. They identify an issue in their locality, in their community. So it's not a challenge set by the museum in London. They have to think about these themes in relation to their worlds and how they then devise their responses to the challenge. They go out, we have a whole methodology around introducing design thinking to the young people in their teams. They do interviews, they learn how to prototype, they learn how to do a design pitch to bring their ideas to life. And it's all supported by a whole series of online resources that use the collection at the museum as a springboard for the young people to develop their own ideas. So this is about empowering young people to believe in the agency of their own creativity and to apply that creativity to bring it to life through these projects. We also run a very wide-ranging professional development programme for teachers through this programme, and we know from studies that have been done through PISA, through UNESCO, at a global level, we know that teachers learn best from each other. Teachers are tinkerers, they love playing with ideas, and museums can support and create the conditions for teachers to work together and to share ideas. And this is what we're trying to create through the V&A, because we can be a forum, sort of an agora to support those peer networks. So we have awards for the winning teams, but also for the teachers. We think that educators, museum educators, and those in schools have the most powerful job on the planet. They are working with almost every young person around the world. So of course we want to support them to use our collection and our resources to do something meaningful and impactful for young people. So this is what, just to give an example of some of the resources. So we have toolkits for teachers, for students, lots of inspiration packs. We run webinars. We did a webinar yesterday, and we had one of the teachers who said she teaches her entire year group through this programme because we develop it with them. It's co-designed, again, with teachers, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot about co-design, co-curation, co-production. It really is becoming the mainstream methodology now for museum practice, and that is so, so exciting. And a lot of multimedia, films of curators, films of designers talking about relevant works. So it's a very inspiring programme, but it's grounded in the real world of teaching practice in schools, because it's got to be relevant as well as inspiring. This is another programme we run nationally called Design Lab Nation. Just very quickly, these are partnerships that we establish in cities around England where they have a very low take-up of design education, and they have a very high level of social deprivation. So we establish partnerships between the museum in London, the regional museum, industrial creatives in the area, and the local schools. And we run a series of in-depth projects around the kind of local heritage. This is a real joy of a project, a museum in Bethnal Green in East London. And Bethnal Green has the highest level of child poverty in all of England, but it's also right next door to Canary Wharf, one of the big financial centre. And the V&A has been in East London for 150 years. We just celebrated the 150th birthday on Friday, and we are creating this museum. It's closed at the moment, it opens next year, for and with the young. So it's going to be a museum of creativity for children from birth to 14, and it's rooted in our understanding of childhood development, but we are co-designing and co-curating this with young people and families and educators in order for it to be, again, meaningful, relevant, inspiring. And it's a really interesting project because generally, and I don't know whether colleagues will concur on the panel, museums are not really designed with children in mind, primarily. And when we were doing the research for Young V&A, we commissioned some research of children. We asked children, what do you think, when someone says the word museum to you, what do you think of? And 33% of those children said, boring. Now that is a clarion call, is it not, to ourselves as museum professionals to reinvent museums for the young, for Gen A, for children born after 2015, who are the post-pandemic generation, whose lives will see more change in their lifetime, and they will have more influence and more impact from the experience of the pandemic than even Gen Z, the teenagers, or the millennials. And we know with Gen A children, they're very community-oriented. Family is really important to them. They really believe in activism, but they want to work with rather than against. They are entrepreneurial, but they enjoy going back to, craft and making. So there's enormous potential, but they're going to face, a huge amount of challenges. So for us, again, it was thinking about how can we harness our resources and create a museum that can really engage with these issues, but in a way that is very joyful, very optimistic, and does that wonderful thing that designers do where you have 2 feet on the ground in the real world, but you have your head in the clouds in a space of what if and imagination and innovation and trying to do things differently in ways that matter. So just finishing them, we also run a youth collective. So the collective at Young V&A is children age 8 to 14, and they're helping us produce the galleries, produce content, programming activities. They've worked with the architects from the outset. They've learned how to prototype, make the models, understand that process. And then we also have collectives for older young people, for teenagers, who also help us shape our exhibitions. They work with our interpretation teams, and they also do the kind of programming into the exhibitions. So we've seen a really big shift, I would argue, and look forward to discussing this with colleagues, in our sector to programmes which have a sort of a T-shape. So we're using the digital with Innovate to reach, in theory, every young person who is at school in England and every teacher. And we're slowly getting there and really empower and celebrate young people's creativity. And then we have the very in-depth local, and it goes back to exactly the museum in the home. For Young V&A, when we started, we mapped every single organisation within a 15-minute walk of the museum, and we made sure that we worked with them. And then we've expanded that to the borough that we're in, so we work with every single school. And then we expand to London, and now we're developing the national programme. So I really believe, an important museum, even if we're a national museum, we need to be very locally rooted, first and foremost, to be that centre of community, and then we can sort of build on that with the ripple effect outwards and harness the potential of digital in the right way to extend that reach and to use the digital resources to really enrich the learning experiences. So,
thank you, Helen. Thank you all for really fascinating presentations. And I'm just a couple of reflections before we start asking some questions. I think, firstly, what risk-taking has taken place here, because in a sense, you're all redefining the museum as being a place for community interaction in new ways. You're talking about bringing artworks out of the museum into people's homes, having people becoming the exhibition spaces, the mediators, the interpreters. There's an awful lot of risk involved in that, and it's a very brave action on the part of the museum. And when I think about your project with involving young people in designing the exhibition, curating the exhibition, doing all the interpretation materials, understanding what exhibition making is, and really co-creating. And I think this is an important word that Helen's brought up and that we're all hearing a lot. The example, I think, of how this project brings other people into making the meaning of a museum and of an exhibition and what it means to people outside, not what it means to the museum, is so important, shifting that centre of balance. And of course, Helen's work is describing working with young people in schools in a completely different way, I think, and thinking about the museum's role in education in a very new way. I feel like the words that have come out to me today are things like agora. I think that's such an important term, and we've talked about it a lot with Art Explora, about how the arts become a centre, a meeting point, a place of discussion and debate. But I think you have thrown the gauntlet, if you know that expression. Helen's given us the challenge. Museums mustn't be boring to the next generation, and that is something we really need to think about. So if I'm turning to you, Stephanie, Claire, could you tell us a little bit more about imagining that some of our colleagues here may want to do a museum at home kind of project? What are some of the do's and the don'ts? You talked a bit about the practicalities, but what not to do? Maybe start with that.
First of all, I have to say that there are already, as we know, 2 museums who have now also engaged on that way, like in Ostend in Belgium, Musée, and then also Jan Kuenen Museum in the Netherlands. So they really, we had an exchange and they also tried that. So it means it's really replicable. For the do's, I would say just don't be afraid to experiment, I would say. Trust the generosity, the creativity, and really the capacity of engagement of your local community. That was quite new for us. I wouldn't have imagined that actually before. Yeah, just don't hesitate to complete, but maybe, yeah, we had...
To build the project with the right partners. So with our own organization, it was not possible to do it by our own. We needed some partners, such as Patrimoine à Roulettes, which is an association of mediators. So we needed help to build very concrete the project, but now it's okay. No, in fact, it's very easy. It's more easy than we thought at the beginning. So the don'ts, maybe the don't to not take the place of the neighbor, of the public. So we stay really. Not back. We share link. We give the most we can give to the public, but we let them do on their own way and their own vision, the way of to talk about the artwork, to develop project. Sometimes we have to contain our desires, but we really stay back. No.
Also take your time. For me, it was the first time I had a so long project, because the start of the project was 4 years, and then you can feel really the impact after that. So one-shot projects are really nice, but very intensive, and sometimes you don't measure the impact. Also, don'ts maybe. Like, for example, that project, it's really also very important that it happens in the home of the people, because we had, for example, shops or galleries which asked, okay, can we be part of that project? And we saw that really the personal touch is really also part of the project. It's really to encounter an artwork, to encounter a host who has really developed a storytelling about the artwork, and that's really what touched also the visitor. So, but I would say you can really try that, because it's yeah, and we can also share the methodology if you want, really with pleasure.
And can I ask how, when the museum reopens, how do you plan to continue the program? What's the legacy?
It's a big question. It's a project, so a project begins, a project have an end. But we are now thinking about it. It's not so clear about what Musée comme chez soi will become. But we need to have another development perspective. Is it in the museum or another other way outside the museum? We have 2 years. The museum will open hopefully within 2 years. So we are now thinking about it. It's not so clear, but we are sure that we want to build something around Musée comme chez soi. There is a legacy to with this project, but it's we have to talk about this within the next months.
Maybe also at the moment we already have like a follow-up, because the host asked us. So at the end of the weekend, we have always a dinner in our empty room in the museum with all the hosts. It's quite an important moment because everybody's tired, but also like excited. And so it's really a good way also to create connection between the neighbors. What's also the purpose of the project. And they asked us, oh, please just organize other meeting events between the neighbors, and we do that once a year. We have the neighbors barbecue at the museum, and this is a first step, I think. But so we have to listen also what they are telling us, because we want to co-create the follow-up with them.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, that idea that the museum is not this intimidating structure, but it becomes a space for community where there is sort of porous links between what's happening outside and what goes on inside, which is also brings me to the Louvre-Lens project. I read that the director of the Louvre-Lens, Marie Lavandier, said, I'm quoting her in English, but she said something like, the museum will learn as much from the young people as they will learn from us. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about what the museum has learned from the young people you've been working with.
I think we learn a lot of things. As I said, young people learn and gain a lot of things, like exposure to ancient arts and modern and contemporary art, because we will have this different art and different art pieces in the exhibition. They discover what is going on behind the scene in a museum and the different jobs needed. And we give also job opportunity and a real status, because some of them are now have a contract and they are employed as curators. But for the Louvre-Lens, I think we now have a better understanding of this target population, because young people aged from 18 to 25 are really difficult to attract in museum. It's a reality for every museum, I think. So we're now, I think, a little bit better able to create projects tailored for this population, for these young people. And I think this maybe collaborative approach was a real confrontation between the team and this public, because every people in the mediation direction are in confrontation every day, every moment with public, but it's not the case for all the teams. So from scenography to communication, every people in this project, every colleagues have to meet these young people and to understand what they have in mind. And I think that we are now able also to share a methodology. Maybe it's not the best, but we try, we involve a methodology, and we would like to compare with other experience like this. And just want to say that this project was very difficult. It is still difficult because of this population, these young curators, but also with the teams, it's not easy to change the way of working. But I think it's necessary to have this kind of project if we want to have visitors in 20 years' time. So it's really important.
And when you say it was really difficult, are you able to share some of the kind of biggest challenges along the way? Is there anything that comes to your mind? Was it challenges to do with allowing them to do things within the museum or use certain objects, or were there challenges more to do with the subject matter they're interested in? What kind of challenges did you face?
For this project?
Yeah.
This project, I think, as I said, there were a lot of objectives. So maybe it was too ambitious, but it was important to be ambitious because we wanted to experiment. The Louvre Lens is really has it in his DNA. It's a Louvre with a difference. So we show art pieces in a different display, as you can see in the Louvre here in Paris. And we show what is going on behind the scene, and we have it's a real place to experiment things that we don't do here, for example. So it's kind of challenges we wanted to experiment.
Thanks. I mean, I think we should come back to that idea of where failure fits into some of this risk-taking. But turning to you, Helen, V&A Innovate, it shows a museum taking a leading role on design education and creativity in schools, creative education. I suppose I'm wondering, is this a new direction for museum education? To what extent do you see museums actually taking the place of traditional school curricula? And are museums responsible for nurturing the creative citizens of the future?
Yes, is a simple answer to the second question. The role of museums as centres of community, as centres of citizenship, well, if you read with Patrick's interview, it was really interesting because one of the things he talked about in that interview was museums as centres of community and the importance of that, because public space and spaces for public engagement, platforms for debate are increasingly becoming more and more either commercialised, part of the corporate world. So I think this absolutely puts the onus on public spaces, cultural spaces, to be those places for debate and for convening. So the idea of the museum as the town square, and in fact we have a programme, the virtual town square programme for Young V&A, where we're exactly convening different voices from different disciplines around very relevant social issues. So I do think that it behoves museums to really engage with their social context and to harness their collections, because museums are still about collections, but they're for people. And it's that connection between the material culture and the lives of our audiences, and how we can foster those connections in ways which are meaningful and social and relevant and really enjoyable and provocative and inspiring and stimulating and all of that. So when we're working, for example, with V&A Innovate, I suppose there's a risk in that project that actually it is sort of about the collection. The collection objects are there to exemplify and inspire, but really it's about a way of thinking. It's for young people to step into the shoes of designers, to think like designers, to be problem solvers, to be pragmatic optimists, and to harness the power of creativity in their own lives and to change their world, change the world. So we do come back to the material culture and the role of that. That's really important, but it's much more than that. It is about active citizenship. It is about supporting young people to learn those skills that we know are so more important, probably more now than ever, of collaboration, of problem solving, of innovation, of critical thinking, of creativity, etc. So I think it's a super important and really exciting opportunity for museums to be this in this place of reinvention and reflection. You know, what are we? How do we genuinely work with our audiences? What do we surrender in that process? And I loved your point about risk, because when you're working in a co-design or co-curation or co-production, if you're doing that really genuinely, you may well end up with some outcomes which will not and should not really tally with some of the orthodoxies of museum practice. Because if we're just coming back to doing things the way that we used to, well, then we're not really, we're not learning, are we? And we're not learning how to do things differently. So our projects sometimes might ruffle some feathers and will be quite provocative, and sometimes will feel a bit unnerving, but that's absolutely right. You know, that's part of the nature of what we're doing. I think with vis-a-vis the role of museums and schools, I used to think, and I've worked in this field now for my 4th decade of working in museums, so I used to think that museums should be complementary and enrich curricula. I don't think that anymore. And obviously I'm speaking very specifically from the context of the English curriculum. Actually, I think we need to be trailblazers and in many cases counterpoints to curricula. Because in a large way, certainly in England, many elements of our curriculum are not particularly relevant to the lives of young people in the 21st century. So I would, you know, critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, working collaboratively. I have a 16-year-old back at home. He's just done 23 exams over 5 weeks, all individually, to kind of pass his grades at age 16. Now, in the grown-up world of work, when do we ever do things on our own? Of course, you know, sometimes we do, but mostly we are collaborating. We are sharing and generating ideas. We are doing things which are applied to the real world. And my goodness, what an exciting and challenging world that is. So museums can create curricula, programs that are relevant and exciting and are based on working with, not for our audiences, but with our audiences. And I love that comment around when you're thinking about what the legacy will be of Museum at Home. Well, we don't know yet, because we need to develop that with our audiences. And that's been a really important shift. So just to finish quickly, with Innovate, what we're trying to do is model what a design curriculum can look like when it's based around teaching those skills of a way of thinking and then a way of acting, rather than, can you design a lovely steady hand game? You know, I mean, how is that going to really support these young people to kind of flourish and have a sense of agency in their lives? So we're very much looking to be, I think, a counterpoint in a very kind of creative and aligned way to curricula.
There's so much in there, and I think one of the things that keeps coming up is, in a way, this idea of, well, co-creating or creating meaning collectively, or devolving and delegating who is making the meaning. And of course this view challenges the traditional authority hierarchy of the museum, and I don't know how different the context is in France, but certainly in the UK you can see that in some institutions that's a very difficult idea. And I just wondered, you know, perhaps Claire, you could tell me, you know, what do you think about this? How has this worked in the context of your museum? And were there some encounters were there some frowns or some anxiety along the way from perhaps some of your colleagues? Or
It's difficult to answer this way. In Belgium, the situation is very special. So I think we have all in common the goal, the purpose. But we have to create with our own context. And we were. Est-ce que la question c'était bien sur la libre? Right. Okay. Yes. In our case, specifically in Musée d'Ixelles, we are very co-creating in the team. So with the public, it's really as equal. We always put the situation in reflection together. So with the public, last year we made a huge consultation of the public to hear them about the view of the future Musée d'Ixelles, but also the future of the museum. So we also take these elements in our project, in our reflection. So it's really, it's not a vision top-down, it's really, that's a new governance, as I would say, I would dare to say. We try really to develop with with the public, with colleagues. It's really open, in fact. It's only with the politic we have to convince sometimes to say dare, share, and but it's okay. It comes always. It's our job to push the project in this way. So it's easy, in fact.
How has this worked for you at the Louvre Lens?
This, for my part, this collaborative exhibition is an idea from the director, Marie Lavandier. So she's really involved in this project, and she's really enthusiastic also. But I think that all these co-building and co-creating programs are part of the Louvre Lens is completely constitutive. Because the Louvre Lens is a museum without collection, and from the beginning, its plan is to work with public. So, for example, we ask public, we consult the public before the opening of exhibition to ask what they are waiting for relative to a theme or a title of exhibition. Also programming sometimes proposed by local association or students. We give them the keys of the museum, and they do what they want. And also workshops are learned to do school in the museum. So it's really important for it's part of our DNA in a way.
And would you all say that this way of working has come out of the pandemic to a certain extent, or recent huge social upheavals and changes? What do you say, what sparked this change that seems to be sweeping through the sector?
I think it's to do with the demographic, actually. So again, to come back to, Gen A, again, children born after 2015, they will be the largest generation, 2 billion on the planet. They'll be the largest generation we have had yet. So there's a groundswell from actually young audiences and families of what they want museums to be. So I think that is definitely pushing the change. And then, yes, there is the impact of the pandemic in terms of perhaps more emphasis on the role of museums as centres of community. But this has been a trajectory, certainly in England, from the late 90s when we had our Labour government and education was much more to the fore. But it was always, that work of co-production or co-curation was always the sort of lean-to. It was the add-on. It was the peripheral where the interesting work happened, but it wasn't substantive. It hadn't come into the core mainstream kind of rationale for ways of working, and that's the big change now, is that, certainly for the V&A, every exhibition we do, or every major programme, there will always be a substantive element of either co-design or co-production or co-curation, because there is a recognition that we need to build those audiences of the future. And the pandemic, I think, has given, it sounds like such a counterintuitive thing to say, but actually there have been a lot of really interesting opportunities that have made, because we were forced to rethink the way that we worked. And I think this has been actually very healthy for the sector to think afresh about how we work with audiences, and that shift from for to with. And of course resources are more constrained, so we need to work in more efficient ways, but at the heart of it, I think, is about being meaningful. Gone are the days now where we can, yes, there's leisure for the sake of leisure, but we know that there is urgency and need for programmes to really help in that area of inspiration and skills and community building. It's absolutely critical. So it's putting a new lens, I think, on how we think about our work and our practice. It's really exciting.
Claire, you were nodding your head about how the pandemic has perhaps created opportunities. What do you?
We are lucky. We were already close. So we were just busy with a lot of questions, reflection, and the pandemic period was an accelerator and pushed the reflection. It was for us as a gift. So it's relative, excuse me. It was a gift to get so many experiences around us, with us. We observed so many things that we were thinking about, and with the pandemic situation, we saw everybody experiences some new kind of mediation, new kind of communication, new everything. So it was for us perfect timing to get this all this observation in our way to rethink the museum. So it was a really wonderful period to be closed first, and to be in a situation of observation and in situation to think. We are already ready to think. So it was not contraint, a strength. It was really an opportunity.
Maybe we had also, like you saw the video. It was during the pandemic. It was really at a moment where we had strict conditions in Brussels, and we asked the people who normally would have done a museum at home normally, physically, if they wanted to cancel the operation, and they said, no, just please do it, because it would be such a privilege to have that artwork at home, even if we don't have the public who can come like normally, and then that's why we did like some Zoom session, and they could just present their artworks live. So I think also when you have that kind of challenges, you can, I think it's interesting to live that and to experience that with your public, and to see also which can be the answer from the public.
And what about you, Lorraine? Was there any specific learnings from the pandemic in your museum?
I think pandemic doesn't change our working method, but we try to be really very reactive since the first days of the lockdown, and so we turn into virtual programs. So we invested our website to propose do-it-yourself workshops or virtual guided tour. And after we proposed visit, but in classroom, for example, with our robot, because it's possible to make robot a visit with a robot. We have a robot, yes, with a camera. So no, it was also an opportunity to test new activities and to be maybe more creative, because we create at that time we created a poetic podcast or scientific podcast. So we tried new things, but.
Well, before I open to the floor, so please start thinking of your questions, I just want to finish by asking you, what do you think are the next challenges that museums face in terms of audience development, engagement? What are the new frontiers for the museums of the future? Helen.
Well, we're hearing quite a lot of conversation about the metaverse, aren't we? So I think that's going to be interesting, whether museums can be slightly on the front foot around that. And then I think, again, from the context in England, certainly, I'm sure it's the same globally, but the impact of Black Lives Matter and a renewed energy around the equality, diversity, inclusion agenda, restitution debates, sustainability, all of these areas of inclusive practice. I think we're beginning to see those moving much more into the mainstream. What does that mean for public engagement? What does that mean for developing your workforce? So there are enormous amount of dynamics, I suppose, coming from the external context for museums, which will help us shape and improve our work so that we become increasingly relevant and meaningful, and those centres of community where we can affect change. I do think the balance of the local and the global is really interesting for larger organisations, especially how you hold on to that local relevance and while also serving a national or an international audience. So there's an interesting inflection between the tech piece and then the absolute, the proximity of being a neighbourhood space. And how do you hold those two things in balance?
Thank you. Who'd like to speak?
No, I'm very agree with what you just said. For me, I think it's what we are now. We are trying to experiment. It's to be local and global at the same time. To be human, but not a temple, but to stay a museum, and to find the balance. It's a really the really goal of the time to find the balance. It's to stay aware of the moving situation, the very unstable situation, and not to take another direction, to stay in the point, a very important point of the society, part of the society.
Maybe I also agree, but yes, maybe really how can we connect our collection to the actual debates, social debates? It's really a demand of the audience. We saw that during our consultation. So that's maybe the challenge, I think, to that our collection makes sense in our society.
Yes, everything is good. As we said a few minutes before, the Musée Agora, I think it's the things we must keep going in this direction, and we need human means, financial, but also a lot of human means to create and to keep developing long-lasting relation with our public, which can allow a very good relation. They feel at home, they be actor of the museum, and they live the museum. So it's really important.
They live the museum. That's a great idea. And can I ask if we have any questions in the audience that you would like to put to our panelists? We don't have too much longer. Any questions about how not to make museums boring? The museum as agora. I think that's a really important point about this long-lasting relationships. It's easy to initiate, but how do you build and grow that community around you? Does anyone want to ask any questions? Well, I've got lots more questions, but we haven't got too much longer. So perhaps we can go to this idea of local and global, and given that we're an international panel here, can we be honest? Do we think there are differences between how things work in the UK, in Belgium, in France? Are there? Do we have sensitivities that are different? Do we think we have different demographics? What makes things? You look like you think there are differences.
Yes, I'm French, but I'm now 30 years in Belgium, and I have my educational statement is French, and we work a lot with France, and we love France, of course. We are in Paris. What I'm going to say, but I feel that maybe not in the Louvre Lens, but we are not in Paris. But I feel that when we talk about musée comme chez soi with some colleagues in France, it's but are you crazy or what? But I think it's going sometimes too far in the academic way of thinking. It's a problem. In Belgium, the situation is so a mess, so complicated that we can be very creative. We can dare. We are so different from Brussels, in Flanders, or in Wales, part of the country, that we have not a structure very pyramidal or with one vision of the nation. It does not exist. So we are very creative. So it's possible to find some little ways to bring some crazy project. So I feel that there is a lot of fascination from outside near our museum in Belgium, that we can do some crazy project like that, because we are in another context, because we are in another way of thinking things. So I think it's a chance to live in a small country. It's a problem also, but it's very interesting with this situation.
I think also like Claire that maybe we share the same concerns. I think it's quite obvious when we are speaking here, but maybe the speed of implementation or maybe the focuses are a little bit different. Because, for example, when we speak about participation or local communities, I'm always looking at your examples in UK or even in the Netherlands, for example, or maybe in the US even. So I think, yeah, the concerns are for me the same, but just, okay, we need to find our ways at our own rhythm, maybe.
Do you want to add anything?
Just one word. I think it depends on the territory. It is not depends on countries. It depends on the size of the institutions and on the territories, and it's related to the problems of its territory. For example, in Lens, we have a very big rate of unemployment. So we must plan. We must propose things relative to this problems or this reality.
Well, actually, that's really interesting. I think there are huge relevances globally for culture. So one of the things I always direct my team to, so the UN Rights of the Child, Article 31, I mean, we know all the articles, but Article 31, access to culture, the right of every child to have access to culture. So that any cultural organisation, whether you're hyper-local or national, that Article 31 absolutely sits, and that is global. I was on a panel the week before last for UNESCO, that are developing a new cultural framework for their cultural policy on arts education. That's global as well. So there are the sort of umbrella pieces which I think, regardless of the size of your institution or your local demographic, touch all of us. And that comes exactly to the question of the panel, young people's access to culture, everyone's access to culture, but in this context for young people. So I think there's that framing. And that speaks to the point around citizenship and agency and the power of art and culture to affect change. And then I absolutely agree. Then it's the piece around doing the work to know your local audience, really doing the work, making that commitment. If it's every home with, I love the idea of going around the neighbourhood with the fantastic gown or the coat and the artworks there. Really taking the time to do that, to understand then what that demographic is and where you can best focus your resources, but it has to be both and. I think, and even a small regional museum can still speak to the global concerns, and then do the work on a local level that can be more broadly contextualised. And that I think is the joy actually of museums, that we have that freedom to do that. And perhaps something that's also coming across very clearly from the panel, which for me is a designerly way, I just love working with designers, is being very outward focused. So rather than shaping programs intrinsically about the collection, it's harnessing and unlocking the potential and the relevance of the collection insofar as those collections, that material culture, can speak to the issues and opportunities and concerns and aspirations and interests of our audiences. And there's a hermeneutics in that, which we've talked about a lot within museum studies, about meaning making and where meaning making resides. And I think this is one of the really interesting shifts we see in our practice in our public programming, in our acquisitions, as we said, around restitution debates. How can we reframe our collections so they can spill out with new narratives which speak to the interests and needs and aspirations of our audiences, and be organisations which look outwards primarily and are audience-centred, but still absolutely deliver on all of our responsibilities to be custodians of material culture. And that's a really interesting, a bit of a shift, I think, in the emphasis and the kind of motivations for the work that we do.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we might close on that note, because there's so much there to do with how we look out from collections and keep the focus on the outside and on our audiences and our partners. Thank you all very much, panellists, for participating today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I just want to also thank the organisers at SITEM, Patricia Friedrich and Cécile Lucas, and thank you very much to Leanne Inez, who from Art Explora has been organising today's panel. And I hope you'll join us at the next event, where we hope to continue conversations like this. I think we all share enormous challenges, and there's so much more to talk about. So please keep an eye on forthcoming events. And of course, the award is open for applications until the 31st of August, and we're looking forward to more innovative projects from across Europe for this year. Thank you very much.